In my eyes, you are beautiful. The cowboy held the pregnant bride's hand, teased, and said, The sun was just beginning to rise over the vast open plains when Ethan Cole stepped out of the small wooden cabin he called home. The wind carried the fresh scent of hay and earth, and the soft lowing of cows in the distance made the ranch feel alive, even in the early morning. Ethan had always liked the quiet of these hours. There was a kind of peace in the way the world seemed to wake slowly, as if it respected those who worked hard and valued the land. Ethan had been alone for a long time. After his parents passed away, he had taken over the ranch and devoted himself to the land, the animals, and the small town nearby. Life had been simple, maybe even lonely at times, but it was steady and honest. He had no interest in distractions, no need for grand gestures, and certainly no patience for the gossip and judgment of others. To him, a person's worth was measured in actions, not in appearances, and the ranch had taught him that lesson more than anything. It was on one ordinary morning, as Ethan was checking the fences along the northern pasture, that a distant sound of wheels on dirt reached his ears. At first he thought it was a local trader or one of the neighbors bringing supplies, but as the sound grew closer, he noticed it wasn't a familiar wagon. Something about the way it creaked and rattled felt different, less steady, more deliberate. Curious, he wiped his hands on his trousers and walked toward the main gate to see who might be arriving so early. Through the rising dust, a carriage appeared, drawn by two strong horses. Its polished wood gleamed in the sunlight, and the small emblem on its side marked it as belonging to the Whitmore family, one of the wealthiest families in the county. Ethan's brow furrowed. He knew the Whitmores by reputation. They were proud, sharp-tongued, and always seemed to have some plan or scheme to impress or unsettle others. He wasn't sure what they wanted here, but he had a feeling it wouldn't be simple. The carriage came to a stop, and a young woman stepped down. She was different from anyone Ethan had ever met in town. She was modestly dressed, with a simple dress that spoke more of practicality than fashion. Her hands were slightly rough, and her eyes carried a mix of nerves and determination. She looked around the ranch, wide-eyed, as if she had never seen so much open space before. Ethan noticed her hesitation and the way she held herself, as though she were trying to make herself smaller, to take up as little space as possible. "Ethan Cole?" a voice called from the carriage. It was firm, polite, but there was an edge to it, like someone issuing an order and hoping it would be obeyed. "That's me," Ethan replied, stepping closer. His voice was calm, steady, like the land he had worked for so many years. "And you are?" "This is Clara Whitmore," the voice said again, and this time a sharp, amused laugh followed. "We thought you might like to meet her." There was a hint of confusion on her face, as if she weren't sure how to respond. He noticed the faintest tremble in her hands, the slight downward tilt of her head. It was a moment of quiet tension, made more curious by the small smirk of the relatives who had accompanied her. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, as if watching a private joke unfold. Clara looked at Ethan and gave a polite nod, almost timidly. "Hello, Mr. Pidd." "Cole," she said softly. Her voice was gentle, but there was a quiet strength behind it, the kind that didn't demand attention, but made it impossible to ignore once noticed. Ethan studied her carefully. He had met many people in his life, and he knew how to read someone by their first expressions, by the way they carried themselves. He could sense the nervousness, but he could also sense something more, something resilient, something thoughtful, something... He didn't respond immediately, letting the moment hang between them. The Whitmores, sensing the pause, seemed pleased. They chuckled quietly among themselves, exchanging knowing glances. It was clear that they had planned this meeting with some hidden purpose, hoping to embarrass Ethan, or perhaps test him in some way. Their whispers carried through the air like a challenge. Would he be fooled by their game, or would he see through it? But Ethan didn't react the way they expected. He didn't laugh, he didn't comment, and he certainly didn't act as if he were judging Clara. He simply nodded. "Welcome to the ranch," he said. "I hope your trip wasn't too difficult." Clara's lips curved into a small, shy smile. "It was fine, thank you," she replied, her eyes flicking briefly to the ground and then back up to him. There was a natural curiosity in her gaze, a desire to take in her surroundings and understand them, not just see them. The family, sensing that the first attempt at a joke wasn't landing as planned, tried to make the moment more pointed.
"You know, Ethan," one of them said with a laugh that tried too hard to sound casual, "Clara isn't exactly what most men would expect."
"But she has qualities, don't you think?" Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't rise to their bait. He looked at Clara again and saw no trace of embarrassment, no attempt to hide her discomfort. Instead, she stood with a quiet dignity, waiting for him to respond. And when he finally spoke, it was simple, almost matter-of-fact. "Everyone has qualities," he said. "Some are easier to see than others. Let's see what she can do around here, then we'll talk." The Whitmores were momentarily stunned. That was not the reaction they had expected. They exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to proceed. Clara, on the other hand, seemed to relax slightly, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had been bracing herself for mockery or rejection, but Ethan's calm, even reaction gave her a small spark of hope. Ethan led her toward the barn, pointing out the animals, explaining the routines, and giving her small tasks to help her get acclimated. She moved cautiously at first, unsure of her footing, but her hands were quick to learn, her movements thoughtful. She asked questions, not the kind that asked for praise, but the kind that showed a desire to understand, to contribute. The morning passed quickly. Clara carried water for the animals, swept the barn, and even helped mend a fence that had been damaged in the wind. Ethan watched her, noting her attention to detail, the care she showed toward the animals, and the way she didn't complain despite being exhausted. He couldn't help but feel a quiet respect growing inside him. By the time the sun had climbed high into the sky, Clara was tired, but there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there when she first arrived. Ethan, too, felt a strange sense of curiosity and anticipation. There was something about her that went beyond appearances, something rare that couldn't be judged by simple gossip or family schemes. As they stood near the barn, watching the cattle move slowly across the field, Clara turned to him and asked softly, Do you often live like this? All alone, on the ranch?"
Most of my life, yes. It's peaceful, and it's honest work.
"But it can get lonely at times. That's why I watch for people who are genuine. People who aren't here to play games or pretend to be something they're not." Clara nodded, understanding more in his words than she let on. "I like honest work," she said, "even if it's hard. I think I could learn to live like this." Ethan looked at her carefully. He didn't offer a response yet. He simply noted it, storing it away, because he had learned that actions often spoke louder than words. And from what he had seen so far, Clara's actions were speaking clearly. The Whitmores, still lingering near the carriage, had begun to grow restless. Their plan to humiliate Clara had not only failed, but they were beginning to see that she was quietly impressing Ethan. They whispered among themselves, their smiles faltering. For the first time, it seemed that their joke might backfire. Ethan didn't notice their discomfort. He focused entirely on the work, the animals, and the young woman beside him. And in that quiet morning on the ranch, as the winds swept across the open plains and the sun warmed the earth, a new chapter had begun. a chapter that neither the Whitmores nor anyone else could predict. By the time the carriage disappeared into the distance, Ethan had a clear thought in his mind. This girl, Clara Whitmore, was not what anyone expected, and somehow he had a feeling that she would change everything about his quiet, orderly life. Clara woke early the next morning, just as the first rays of sunlight began to stretch across the rolling hills. The air was crisp and fresh, filled with the scent of dew-soaked grass and hay. For a moment she paused on the porch of the small cabin that Ethan called home, breathing it all in. The ranch was vast, far bigger than anything she had ever seen, and the quiet beauty of the place made her heart feel lighter. She still felt nervous about the day ahead, but for the first time since leaving her family, she also felt a spark of hope. Ethan was already outside, tending to the horses in the stable. His movements were smooth and practiced, a rhythm born from years of experience. He seemed unaware of the passing hours, entirely absorbed in his work. Clara watched him from a distance, wondering how someone could find so much peace in such hard work. She had always lived under her family's sharp words and endless expectations, and she had never known such calm focus in a person before. "Morning, Clara," Ethan said without looking up, noticing her presence immediately. His voice was calm, steady, and carried the authority of someone who had spent a lifetime in charge of his own world. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," Clara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She felt a little shy in his presence, yet something about the ranch, and about Ethan himself, made her feel safer than she had felt in a long time. "You ready for another day?" he asked, finally glancing at her with a faint smile. It was small, but it reached his eyes, giving them a warmth that few people saw. "I think so," Clara said, straightening her back. She felt determination welling up inside her. She didn't want to disappoint him, or herself. Ethan handed her a pair of work gloves and gestured toward the barn. "We've got some fences to repair, and the cattle need feeding. You can start with the water troughs and see how it goes." Clara nodded and got to work. At first, her movements were awkward. She hadn't handled animals like this before, and the heavy buckets of water made her arms ache. But she quickly adjusted, paying attention to every instruction Ethan had given her the day before. There was a rhythm to the work, a sense of purpose, and she began to feel the satisfaction that came from contributing to something tangible. Ethan watched her quietly from a distance. He didn't need to speak much. Her actions spoke louder than words. He noticed how carefully she approached each task, how she learned quickly from her mistakes, and how she treated the animals gently yet confidently. It was rare, he thought, to meet someone who combined intelligence with patience and resilience, and he felt an unfamiliar stir of curiosity about her. The morning passed in a steady pace. Clara carried feed to the cows, swept out the barn, and helped mend a fence that had been damaged by the wind. Sweat dotted her forehead, but she barely noticed, focused entirely on the tasks at hand. The physical labor was tiring, but she found it oddly freeing. For the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking about what others thought of her appearance or trying to fit into a role her family had assigned. She was simply herself, and that was enough. Around midday, Ethan called her over to the edge of the field. "Take a break for a few minutes," he said. "I want to show you something." Clara followed him, curiosity sparking in her chest. He led her to a hill that overlooked the ranch. From there she could see the entire expanse, the grazing cattle, the barns, the small cabin, and the winding dirt roads that led to the nearby town. The view was breathtaking, and she felt a sense of wonder that she hadn't felt since childhood. "This place, it's amazing," she said softly, almost to herself. Ethan smiled, watching her reaction. "It is," he agreed. "It's a lot of work, but it's honest work. And it teaches you things you can't learn anywhere else. Patience, responsibility, respect for the land, things that last longer than money or appearances. Clara nodded thoughtfully. She thought about her family, about the way they had laughed at her and tried to make her feel small. Here on this ranch, their opinions didn't matter. She felt a quiet sense of pride swell inside her. Maybe she wasn't the person her family wanted her to be, but she was exactly who she needed to be. After a short break, they returned to the barn to finish the morning chores. This time, Clara handled the animals with more confidence. She even began noticing small details Ethan hadn't pointed out. A cow that looked uncomfortable, a gate that needed tightening, a tool that could be placed more efficiently. Ethan watched her with a growing sense of admiration. It wasn't just her willingness to work that impressed him. It was her ability to think ahead, to notice things others might overlook. By mid-afternoon, they took the horses out for a short ride across the fields. Clara had never ridden for long distances before, but Ethan guided her patiently, showing her how to control the horse with subtle movements and gentle commands. She laughed when the horse bolted slightly over a small hill, and Ethan's steady presence calmed her. The laughter was light, genuine, and it surprised both of them. Clara realized she hadn't laughed like that in years, and Ethan realized he hadn't heard anyone laugh like that in a long time. As they rode, they began talking about more than just the ranch. Clara asked about Ethan's childhood, how he had learned to run the ranch alone, and what he thought about the future. Ethan shared simple stories, lessons learned from mistakes, the joy of seeing something grow, the satisfaction of a hard day's work. Clara listened intently, offering her own thoughts when she could. Their conversation was easy, flowing naturally, a stark contrast to the tension she had felt with her family. By the time the sun began to sink toward the horizon, casting a golden glow over the land, they returned to the barn. Clara was tired but satisfied. She felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. Ethan, too, felt a quiet satisfaction. He had met many people in his life, but few had made him feel as intrigued and as connected as this young woman had in just a single day. Later, as Clara prepared dinner in the small kitchen of the cabin, she reflected on her day. She had expected to feel awkward, out of place, or even ridiculed. Instead, she had felt capable, valued, and, most importantly, herself. She thought about the way Ethan had treated her, with respect, patience, and quiet observation. She had never experienced anything like it, and a small hope began to bloom inside her heart. Maybe, just maybe, she could belong here. Ethan entered the cabin later, carrying a basket of fresh eggs and vegetables from the garden. He placed it on the counter with a nod. "Dinner will be simple," he said, "but it's enough." Clara smiled. "Simple is perfect," she replied. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily. Clara spoke of small memories from her childhood, of her favorite books, and of the small town she had grown up in. Ethan listened, occasionally sharing a memory of his own. There was a quiet companionship developing between them, a bond that didn't rely on appearances, gossip, or expectations. It was built on respect, shared experience, and the honest work of the day. Later that evening, as Clara prepared to go to bed, she paused by the window and looked out over the darkened fields. The stars were bright in the clear sky, and the soft sounds of the ranch at night were comforting. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel small or unwanted. She felt seen, respected, and capable. She felt the faint beginnings of something new, not just a place to stay, but a life she could grow into. Ethan, in the cabin's other room, thought about the day as well. He realized that Clara had exceeded every expectation he hadn't even known he had. She was not just surviving, she was thriving, quietly proving herself in ways that mattered far more than looks or social approval. He felt a rare sense of anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. The night passed peacefully, and when morning came, it was clear that something had shifted. Clara was no longer just a guest on the ranch. She was beginning to become part of it. She had earned a small place in Ethan's world through her hard work, her honesty, and her courage. And though neither of them could say it yet, both felt the faint stirrings of a connection that would grow stronger with each passing day. For the first time, Clara felt like she belonged somewhere. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he had found someone whose presence could change the rhythm of his life, not through appearances or pretense, but through character, determination, and the simple courage to try. Days passed on the ranch, each one blending into the next, yet every day brought new lessons and small triumphs for Clara. She woke with the sunrise, helped feed the animals, and learned more about the land than she ever imagined possible. Her body was growing stronger from the work, and her confidence was growing even faster. She had discovered a rhythm she liked, a rhythm of effort, quiet satisfaction, and honest reward. Ethan watched her from the corner of his eye, often without her noticing. He was no stranger to observing people. Years on the ranch had taught him to notice little things that others overlooked. He noticed the way she handled the animals, the patience she showed when something went wrong, and the way she never gave up, even when the tasks were exhausting. There was a grace to her determination, a thoughtfulness in her actions, and a quiet joy that came from doing things right, rather than doing them for approval. One morning, while repairing a broken fence near the far pasture, Clara paused and wiped the sweat from her brow. "This fence is never ending," she said with a tired laugh, "but at least I'm learning something new every day. It does feel endless sometimes, but every plank you put in place, every knot you tie, makes a difference. One day you'll look around and see it all standing strong, because of the effort put in now." Clara smiled. "I think I understand. Everything here seems to matter, even the small things." "That's the ranch," Ethan said simply. "It teaches you patience."
And respect, and that small things often make the biggest difference.
Over the next few days, Clara began noticing details she had never paid attention to before. Which animals were hungry, which fields needed extra water, how the weather might affect the crops. She asked questions, experimented with small solutions, and learned from Ethan's gentle guidance. He began to rely on her opinion, asking what she thought about a broken gate or a patch of soil that wasn't growing as it should. She offered suggestions, and they worked together to fix problems, side by side. One afternoon, while they were moving cattle to a new pasture, a sudden storm swept across the plains. The wind howled and rain began to pour, soaking them within minutes. Most people would have panicked, but Clara moved quickly and calmly, helping guide the frightened cattle into the shelter. Ethan was impressed, not only with her courage, but with her ability to think clearly under pressure. "You handled that well?" Ethan said once the animals were safe. Most people would have run for cover. Clara laughed, shaking her wet hair from her eyes. "I wasn't about to leave them in trouble. They need someone calm right now." Ethan nodded, seeing in her words a reflection of his own philosophy. Action mattered more than fear. "You have a good head on your shoulders," he said quietly, almost as if he were talking to himself. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan and Clara grew closer. Their bond was built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the small victories of life on the ranch. Clara learned to ride horses across long distances, to mend fences, to recognize the signs of illness in the animals, and even to predict changes in the weather by observing the clouds and the wind. Each day brought a new challenge, and each challenge brought them closer together. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Ethan and Clara sat on a small hill overlooking the ranch. They had just finished a long day of work, and both were tired but satisfied. "You know," Clara said softly, "I never imagined a life like this. I always thought I'd just follow the rules my family set for me, but this feels real, honest, alive, alive." Ethan looked at her, his eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "That's what I like about this place. It doesn't care about wealth, appearances, or gossip. It only cares about effort, honesty, and heart." Clara smiled, feeling warmth in her chest that went beyond the sunlight. "I think I'm starting to understand that. And I want to be part of it, not just for today, but for as long as I can." Ethan nodded, a small smile crossing his lips. There was a silence between them, comfortable and unforced, filled with the shared sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cows, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird. In that quiet moment, they both felt something shifting, a subtle acknowledgement of connection that neither had spoken aloud, but both recognized. The next morning, Clara tried her hand at more difficult tasks. She learned to repair broken tools, mend torn saddles, and even help with bookkeeping for the supplies and sales. Each task, no matter how small, gave her a sense of pride. Ethan noticed her growing confidence and was quietly impressed. Her family's words about her being ugly or incapable no longer seemed to matter. Clara's abilities and character were far more important than appearances, and Ethan admired her all the more for it. One day the Whitmores sent a letter, supposedly just checking in, but clearly meant to remind Clara of the place they believed she belonged in their world. Ethan read it aloud with her, their horses tied nearby as they worked together in the barn. Clara listened quietly, feeling the old familiar sting of judgment, but this time it didn't hurt as much. She had proven herself here, and the words of her family could not take away the confidence and respect she had earned on the ranch. "Don't worry about them," Ethan said firmly, noticing her tension. "They might try to belittle you, but it won't matter here. Actions speak louder than words. You're right. I don't need their approval anymore." As the days went on, the bond between them deepened. They shared small joys, laughing when a stubborn cow refused to move, celebrating when a fence was finished faster than expected, enjoying quiet meals together. They began to trust each other, not just in work, but in thought and feeling. Clara discovered that Ethan had a quiet sense of humor and a gentle kindness hidden beneath his rugged exterior. Ethan discovered that Clara was intelligent, quick-witted, and brave in ways that surprised him. One afternoon, while they were fixing a water trough near the river, Clara slipped slightly on the wet stones. Ethan's hand shot out instinctively, steadying her before she fell. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Clara felt her heart beat faster, and Ethan felt a flicker of emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. It was not romance yet, but it was the beginning of something that could grow into it. After the moment passed, they both laughed nervously and returned to their work. But neither forgot it. The incident reminded them that they were not just partners in labor, but companions in life, people who could depend on each other, who could understand and respect one another in ways that were rare and precious. By the end of the third week, the Whitmores arrived at the ranch in person, curious to see how their plan had unfolded. They expected to find Clara embarrassed or out of place, yet they were immediately met with a surprising sight. Clara moving confidently among the animals, giving instructions and handling tasks with skill and calmness. Ethan stood nearby, observing her with quiet pride. The Whitmores were speechless. Their carefully crafted joke had completely failed. Clara had grown beyond their expectations, not just surviving but thriving in a world they thought would overwhelm her. She had proven her strength, her intelligence, and her character in ways that appearances could never convey. Ethan, sensing their surprise, spoke calmly.
She's doing very well here. She belongs.
Clara looked at Ethan, and for the first time she felt fully seen, not as the ugly daughter, not as a target for ridicule, but as someone capable, respected, and valued. She smiled softly, a mixture of relief and pride, and felt a new sense of belonging she had never known before. That evening, as the sun set over the rolling fields and the ranch grew quiet, Clara reflected on her journey so far. She had arrived expecting judgment, ridicule, and disappointment, but instead, she had found a place where her effort, courage, and character mattered more than any superficial measure. She had found respect, companionship, and perhaps something even more meaningful, the beginning of a life she could call her own. Ethan, too, reflected on the changes he had seen. Clara had brought new energy and insight to the ranch, and he realized he had grown to admire her more than he had expected. She was strong without arrogance, gentle without weakness, and brave without showiness. She had a rare combination of qualities that not only earned his respect, but stirred something deeper within him. In the quiet of the evening, as the stars began to twinkle above the ranch, both of them understood that their connection had grown far beyond work or obligation. It was a bond formed through shared effort, mutual respect, and the quiet recognition of each other's worth. And while neither of them spoke of it yet, there was an unspoken understanding that this bond would only grow stronger in the days to come. The Whitmores arrived at the ranch one bright morning, their carriage rolling slowly over the dusty road. They had come expecting to witness Clara falter, expecting to see her awkward and uncertain, perhaps even embarrassed in front of Ethan. They had imagined the perfect moment to snicker, to remind her of all the ways they believed she was inferior. But the moment they stepped onto the ranch, it became clear their plan had completely failed. Clara was already outside, moving among the animals with skill and confidence. She guided the cattle toward the barn, spoke gently to the frightened horses, and even fixed a gate that had been leaning precariously. Every movement she made showed calm, intelligence, and a quiet strength that the Whitmores had not anticipated. Ethan was nearby, repairing a section of fence. He looked up as they arrived and gave a simple nod. "They're here," he said to Clara. Clara's heart skipped a beat, but she did not falter. She straightened her back, wiped her hands on her trousers, and continued her work. She had spent weeks proving herself on this ranch, and she would not let their words or presence shake her now. The Whitmores stepped out of the carriage, their smiles strained, their eyes scanning the ranch for signs of the disaster they had hoped to see. But there was none. Clara moved with ease and authority, and the animals responded to her presence, calm and obedient. Even the ranch hands, who had been wary of the Whitmores' intentions, watched in quiet admiration. "Clara," one of them began, attempting a patronizing tone, "I see you've settled in." Clara looked up and smiled politely. "Yes. The ranch takes work, and I like to do it well." The family's eyes narrowed, expecting hesitation, but none came. They looked to Ethan, hoping he would respond with disapproval or embarrassment. But Ethan only nodded at Clara's competence. "She's doing very well," he said simply. "She's learning, she's capable, and she belongs here." Their smirks vanished, replaced by awkward silence. They had come with the expectation of superiority, expecting to assert control and see Clara embarrassed. Instead, they were met with the quiet truth. She had outshone their expectations without even trying. Clara moved closer to Ethan, offering a small smile. She had grown confident in herself, no longer fearing their judgment or cruelty. "Thank you," she said softly, almost to herself, "for trusting me." Ethan's gaze met hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them.
"You've earned it," he replied.
"Not because of anyone's approval, but because of who you are and what you've done." The Whitmores tried again, attempting to shift the blame, to belittle her in front of the ranch hands. "Well, we never thought someone like her would manage a place like this," one of them said, trying to sound casual, but it came across as weak and desperate. Ethan's voice cut through the tension. "I don't care what you thought. I care about results, effort, and respect. Clara has all of that." The words hit harder than any insult could. The Whitmores exchanged uncomfortable glances, realizing that their carefully planned joke had completely backfired. They had intended to humiliate her, but instead they had revealed Clara's strengths and their own pettiness in stark contrast. Clara's face remained calm, her confidence unshaken. She had worked tirelessly to earn this respect, and now it was undeniable. She had faced judgment, doubt, and ridicule, and yet here she stood, strong, capable, and fully herself. Throughout the day, Clara continued her work, demonstrating skill and knowledge that impressed not just Ethan but everyone who witnessed her efforts. She repaired broken tools, organized supplies, and even guided a young ranch hand through the proper care of the animals. Each task was completed with precision and care, showing a blend of intelligence, determination, and heart that could not be ignored. The Whitmores lingered, growing increasingly uncomfortable. They had imagined themselves in control, expecting Clara to falter, but every moment they watched her work revealed their plan's failure. The more they observed, the more apparent it became that she was not only surviving but thriving in a way they could neither understand nor undo. At one point, Clara noticed one of the Whitmores watching a horse that had been acting skittish. She walked over, gently patting the animal and speaking softly, calming it with patience and confidence. The horse settled immediately, and the family member blinked in surprise, unable to hide a hint of admiration.
"This is remarkable," the Whitmore whispered, almost to themselves.
Clara turned to Ethan, a small, satisfied smile on her face. "I think they're beginning to see," she said quietly. Ethan nodded, his eyes reflecting pride. "They're seeing what matters," he replied. By the evening, the Whitmores' embarrassment was complete. They had come intending to mock, but instead, they had witnessed Clara's undeniable competence, intelligence, and character. Every attempt to belittle her had only emphasized her strength. It was a reversal they could not recover from, and they left the ranch with muted words, their faces pale and serious. Once the carriage had disappeared into the distance, Clara allowed herself a deep breath. She had faced their judgment head-on, and it had no power over her anymore. She looked at Ethan, who was leaning against the barn with a small, approving smile. "You did it," he said simply. "You faced them and never wavered." Clara smiled, a sense of relief and pride washing over her. "I couldn't have done it without the ranch, or without your trust." "No, you did it yourself. I only gave you the chance to show it." That night, as they sat outside under the stars, Clara reflected on everything that had happened. She had arrived expecting ridicule and disappointment, yet she had found respect, admiration, and a sense of belonging. She had proven her worth not through appearances or words, but through action, patience, and determination. Ethan watched her thoughtfully, admiring the quiet strength she carried. The day's events had shown him something important. Clara was not only capable and intelligent, but also courageous in ways that mattered most. She had faced not only the land and its challenges, but also the cruelty of others. and she had emerged stronger. The days that followed were filled with small victories and new challenges. Clara continued to work alongside Ethan, gaining more responsibility and earning the respect of everyone on the ranch. The bond between them grew stronger, built on trust, admiration, and shared effort. They laughed together, worked together, and quietly acknowledged the unspoken connection forming between them. The Whitmores never returned to challenge her again, realizing that their attempts to undermine her had only revealed her true value. Clara had shown them, and herself, that strength, intelligence, and kindness mattered far more than appearances or the opinions of those who could not see beyond the surface. By the end of the week, Clara had transformed from the timid, unsure young woman who had arrived at the ranch into someone confident, capable, and respected. She had earned her place not by demanding it, but by proving herself through honest work, patience, and integrity. Ethan, too, felt a subtle but powerful shift in his life. He had spent so many years alone, yet now he found someone whose presence inspired him, challenged him, and complimented him. Clara had become more than a helper on the ranch. She had become a partner in life, someone whose courage, intelligence, and heart he could trust completely. As the sun set over the ranch, casting a warm golden light across the fields, Clara stood beside Ethan, looking out over the land she had helped care for and nurture. She felt a sense of accomplishment and belonging that she had never known before. "I think I'm finally home," she said softly. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "You are," he replied simply, "and you always will be." For the first time in her life, Clara knew that her value was not determined by others' opinions or judgments. She had proven her worth through courage, effort, and heart, and she had earned a place in a life full of respect, trust, and hope. The ranch had become more than just land or work. It had become a home, a place where she was seen, appreciated, and cherished for who she truly was. And in that quiet moment, under the endless sky, both Clara and Ethan understood that something rare and beautiful had begun. A bond built on respect, admiration, and shared effort had transformed their lives, and nothing could ever undo the strength and connection they had discovered together. The mornings on the ranch had grown brighter for Clara. She woke with purpose, her body strong from the labor, and her mind clear with confidence. Every day she learned something new. Every task gave her a sense of pride she had never known before. The land no longer seemed vast and intimidating. It felt like a place she belonged, a place where her efforts mattered, and through it all, Ethan was always there. Not just as a teacher, but as a companion, a steady presence she could rely on. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Clara walked through the pasture, checking on the cattle. She smiled as she saw Ethan already working on the far fence, hammering in nails with precision. His figure was strong and steady, and for a moment she paused to watch him, appreciating the quiet confidence he carried. She remembered the first day she had arrived, uncertain and nervous, and realized just how far she had come. Ethan glanced up and noticed her standing there. He waved and she returned the gesture with a smile. There was an ease between them now, a silent understanding built over weeks of shared work, trust, and quiet companionship. Neither of them needed to speak to feel the bond growing between them. As Clara approached, Ethan set down his hammer. "Morning," he said simply. "The cattle look healthy today. You've been doing well with them." Clara felt a warmth in her chest. "Thanks, Ethan. I'm learning from the best." She laughed softly, and he returned the smile, a rare expression that made his rugged features appear almost gentle. They spent the day working side by side, repairing fences, moving animals, and checking supplies. Their conversations were light but meaningful, filled with laughter, stories, and observations about life on the ranch. Clara noticed that she no longer felt the weight of her family's judgment. She was focused on the work, the land, and the small joys of life that mattered most. By mid-afternoon, the sun had reached its highest point, casting a golden glow over the fields. Clara paused to wipe the sweat from her brow and looked around at the ranch. Everything they had worked on, the fences, the animals, the small cabin, stood as a testament to effort, care, and dedication. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment and pride. Ethan walked over to her, carrying 2 glasses of fresh water. "You've come a long way," he said quietly, handing her one of the glasses. "And not just with the work. You've shown courage, intelligence, and patience that I rarely see." Clara took a sip, feeling refreshed. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance," she replied softly. "And without the chance to prove myself?" Ethan nodded, his eyes meeting hers. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, a recognition of something deeper than admiration. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "You've proven yourself every day. Not just to me, but to yourself. You're capable of more than you realize." Clara felt her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from a strange, pleasant warmth. She had always wondered if she could belong somewhere, if she could be valued for who she was. And now, standing here with Ethan, she knew the answer. She could. As the day drew to a close, they finished the last of the chores and walked toward the cabin together. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, the sun dipping low behind the hills. Clara felt a quiet happiness settle over her. She had arrived at the ranch expecting ridicule, expecting to be judged, and found lacking. Instead, she had found respect, friendship, and a place where she could grow. That evening, after a simple meal, they sat outside under the stars. The air was cool and clear, filled with the sounds of the ranch, the gentle lowing of the cows, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant call of an owl. Clara leaned back in her chair and let herself relax completely. "Clara," Ethan began softly, "I want to tell you something." She turned to him, curiosity and a hint of anticipation in her eyes. "I've spent a long time alone," he continued. "I thought I preferred it that way, but you've shown me something I didn't realize I was missing. You've brought life, insight, and joy into my world. I respect you. I admire you. And
I care for you more than I thought I could."
Clara felt her heart swell. She had sensed this growing connection, this unspoken bond, but hearing it in words made it real. "Ethan," she whispered, I feel the same. I never imagined I could feel this way about anyone, or anywhere, but here, with you, it feels right. It feels like home."
Ethan reached out and took her hand gently. "You are home, Clara."
"Not just here on the ranch, but here, in my life. I want us to face this life together, side by side." Tears of happiness filled Clara's eyes. She squeezed his hand, a silent promise of trust, loyalty, and companionship. For the first time, she felt completely accepted, completely valued, not for how she looked, not for what others said, but for who she truly was. The following days were filled with quiet joy. Clara continued her work on the ranch, each day becoming more skilled and confident. Ethan supported her, offering guidance when needed but allowing her independence and space to grow. Their bond deepened naturally, built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and an unspoken love that grew stronger with each passing day. One afternoon they rode together across the pasture, the wind blowing through their hair, laughter spilling freely between them. Clara realized that she had never felt so happy, so alive. The ranch had given her more than skills and purpose. It had given her connection, love, and the sense that she truly belonged somewhere. Ethan noticed the light in her eyes, the way she laughed, the confidence she carried. He felt a quiet gratitude that she had come into his life, that she had not only accepted the challenges of the ranch, but had embraced them with courage and joy. She had transformed his life as much as the ranch had transformed hers. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky with brilliant colors, they returned to the cabin. Clara paused at the door, looking back at the fields, the animals, and the fences they had worked so hard to maintain. Everything felt complete, balanced, and beautiful. Ethan walked up beside her, slipping his arm around her shoulders. "This is our life," he said softly, "built together, cared for together, and lived honestly. I can't imagine it any other way." Clara leaned into him, a sense of peace settling over her. "Neither can I," she replied. "I've found more than I ever dreamed of here. I've found a home, respect, purpose, and love." Ethan looked down at her, a smile touching his lips. "And I've found the same. You've changed my world, Clara, in ways I never expected." They stood together in the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the ranch that had become their shared life. The stars twinkled above and the land stretched out endlessly around them, a symbol of the future they would build together. In that moment there were no doubts, no fears, no judgment from the past, only trust, love, and a deep understanding that they had found in each other something rare and beautiful. The next morning, as they worked together on the ranch, there was a new ease in their companionship. They laughed, spoke freely, and worked seamlessly as a team. Clara no longer worried about her past or what others thought. She had proven herself, gained respect, and found the love she had longed for. Ethan no longer felt the solitude that had once defined his life. Together they had created something enduring, a life filled with purpose, care, and shared joy. Clara realized that her family's cruel joke had unintentionally led her to the place she was meant to be. She had been sent to the ranch to be mocked, but instead she had found acceptance, confidence, and a love she had never imagined. Every challenge, every task, every difficult moment had prepared her for this life and for this love. Ethan, observing her as she worked with ease and laughter, understood that Clara had become indispensable, not just on the ranch, but in his heart. He had never believed appearances mattered, but now he knew the truth even more clearly. It was heart, courage, and character that truly defined a person. Clara had all of that, and more. As the sun set one evening, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Clara and Ethan stood together on a hill overlooking the ranch. They held hands, feeling the connection between them deepen with every passing day. The ranch was no longer just land. It was a symbol of what they had built together, a life of respect, trust, and love. "I'm glad you stayed," Ethan replied, his voice filled with quiet certainty. And so, life continued on the ranch. Clara and Ethan faced each day together, working, learning, and laughing side by side. They had built a life founded on respect, strengthened by shared effort, and enriched by love. The hardships of the past, the cruel words of family, and the expectations of others were nothing compared to the life they had chosen and the bond they had formed. In the end, Clara was no longer the ugly daughter in anyone's eyes. She was strong, confident, capable, and deeply loved, and Ethan had found, in her, everything he had quietly hoped for: a partner, a friend, and the love that made life on the ranch and in the heart complete. Together they faced the future, not with fear or uncertainty, but with joy, trust, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing they had each other, and that, no matter what, they were home.